Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today we are going to be choosing the best metal band from all 50 US states. There's a lot to talk about here. Let's dive in. This was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be because, for some of these states, for a lot of them actually, you have to dig pretty deep because their scenes aren't all that active. But that said, I found one for each state here. Getting started with Alabama, I'm going to go with Skeletal Earth. Not a ton of bands in Alabama, but, Skeletal Earth are a cool band formed in Huntsville in 1987. They have two studio albums from the 90s that are definitely worth checking out for, a neat mix of hardcore punk and early death metal. Some great riffs on there, too. Speaking of states with not too many native bands, Alaska up next here. They don't have much, but they do have 36 Crazy Fists. You might remember them from the Resident Evil Apocalypse soundtrack. Great soundtrack. You also had a Perfect Circle on there. Rammstein, Killswitch Engage on that too. So lots of great bands on that soundtrack. I have to pick it up at some point. But, 36 Crazy Fists are, a solid metalcore band. A lot of metalcore is hit or miss for me, but their first few records are definitely worth a listen. Pretty unique with some awesome breakdowns. I should mention I'm going in alphabetical order, by the way. So next up we have Arizona. Let's go with Flotsam and Jetsam. They're one of those bands that never lost their spark. Thrash metal legends that came out swinging in the 80s with, killer riffs and a sound that, mixed technical skill with, pure thrash energy. And somehow they've managed to keep that fire burning decades later. I mean, they're still putting out great records here that hit just as hard as their early stuff. Their most recent record, I Am the Weapon, was amazing. One of my favorite thrash albums of last year. Arkansas, let's go with Paul Bearer here. Awesome doom metal band, keeping, modern doom alive. And they started out with a clear influence from, Watching from a Distance by Warning, but have really evolved since into their own thing entirely. And I don't think they've made a bad album. Still melodic, soul-crushingly heavy, but their most recent album, Mind Burns Alive, felt a bit more stripped back. They do a fantastic job, though, of capturing, the bleakness of the doom genre at its core. California, gotta go with Metallica, and I mean, come on. There are tons of great bands from California, whether it be from the thrash metal scene or from the Sunset Strip, but I don't think any of them had as big of an impact as Metallica. Now, I'm a bit biased. They're my second favorite band of all time, which, I guess makes them my favorite American band of all time, but if you're a fan of thrash's formative years, the early stuff speaks for itself. Personally, I love all eras of Metallica, so had to go with them here for California, but honorable mentions here to Slayer and Wasp too. What about Colorado? I'm going with Blood Incantation. Are they the Pink Floyd of death metal? Maybe, but, for my money, they're the most innovative death metal band in the scene today. They continue to push the boundaries of what death metal can be, which, in a genre where, and I've talked about this a lot in the past, where bands are trying to replicate, other bands, like Death or Cannibal Corpse, it's refreshing to hear a band like Blood Incantation branching out, and no doubt we're going to look back on their most recent album, Absolute Elsewhere, as one of those important metal records of the decade years later. Let's move to the east now with Connecticut, where I'm going to go with Fate's Warning. One of those bands that never really got the spotlight they truly deserved, but, if you're into progressive metal, they're absolute legends. They've been around since the early 80s, constantly evolving their sound from, their classic metal roots to complex, emotional prog masterpieces, and albums like Awaken the Guardian and Parallels show, just how versatile they are. I think Ray Alder's vocals really took them to the next level, but I dig the stuff with John Arch too. Next, we have Delaware, and for this one, I admit I had to cheat a bit and go outside the realms of heavy metal to hard rock and blues rock here with George Thorogood and the Destroyers. Delaware, it was hard to find one here, but George Thorogood, one of the greatest, most underrated guitarists in all of rock. Excellent live and still killing it today. So, yeah, kind of cheated here. Not metal, but everyone loves Lonesome George. Florida, great state for metal. So many bands from the Florida death metal scene that come to mind, but most of that scene would cease to exist without the influence of death. So, gotta go with them here. They really helped to birth the entire scene. Chuck Schuldiner is an absolute legend, and the evolution of their catalog really is fascinating, and he didn't even get to reach his full vision before his passing, unfortunately. So many great musicians passed through death over the years. Chuck could work with pretty much anybody, and albums like, Leprosy, Human, Symbolic, and more are still the blueprint from which, so many modern death metal acts copy from to this day. Let's stick in the southeast here with Georgia and go with Mastodon. Rest in peace, Brent Hines. Mastodon are just one of those bands that seem to get better, the more you dig into them, right? I mean, they've got a wild mix of, sludge and prog, but albums like Leviathan and Crack the Sky, they're basically modern metal classics, and even their newer stuff like Emperor of Sand and Hushed and Grim, show that they're still evolving their sound, still getting more introspective without losing their raw edge, and they're one of those rare bands where everyone contributes something essential, and you can genuinely tell they care about pushing their sound forward. On to Hawaii here, and I'm going to go with the band, Hawaii. Really underrated band formed in 1981 by former Deuce guitarist Marty Friedman. Wonder whatever happened to him, but they also went by the name Vixen for a little while, not to be confused with the female band of the same name. They recorded several demos before releasing the Made in Hawaii EP in 1983. Another early recording appeared on Metal Massacre 2 in 1982 under the name Aloha. And after Hawaii split up, Marty Friedman formed the band Cacophony. So it's hard to find bands from Hawaii, but you can never go wrong with Marty Friedman. Not a lot of bands to choose from in Idaho, but I'm going to give the nod here to Septic Death. A huge influence on grindcore and thrashcore, one of the first US hardcore bands. They had a decent following in Japan after the release of their only full-length studio album, Now That I Have the Attention, What Do I Do With It? And they were surprisingly technical despite their fast-paced style, and interestingly enough, the band released EP Burial My after breaking up in 1987, which featured James Hetfield on backing vocals. My pick for Illinois here is Macabre, one of the most unique bands in all of extreme metal. They pioneered the murder metal subgenre, but they're also a lot of fun, great mix of thrash and death metal. Dennis the Menace is such an underrated drummer, and they've had the same lineup since the beginning, all the way back in the 80s here. One of the most consistent bands out there. Criminally underrated group, so happy I found them a while back. Always love talking about them here on the channel. Next, Indiana, gonna go with Iced Earth, formed in Tampa, Florida, but based in Columbus, Indiana, so it counts, Prime Iced Earth were an awesome blend of power metal and thrash. They had a great 4-album run with Matt Barlow from Burnt Offering through Horror Show, but I love the Ripper Owens era of Iced Earth personally. Ripper did some of the best work of his career with Iced Earth, particularly on The Glorious Burden. Fantastic records, so I'm partial to that era of the band. Kind of wish Ripper would have done more than just 2 albums with them. The first band that comes to mind when you think Iowa has got to be Slipknot. I mean, they've got an album named after it, for God's sake. New metal legends, they really need no introduction, even after all these years. With the end so far, they're still pushing themselves into new territory. I saw them live last year on the 25th anniversary tour. It was awesome. It was sick, no pun intended. So really excited to hear where they go next, especially with Eloy Casagrande now behind the kit. Next up, we have Kansas. I guess it has to be Manila Road, right? Great 80s output. Crystal Logic to Mystification was a great album run, and they started out in the late 70s, proggy and more psychedelic, but they got heavier over the years. Very unique sound with versatile songwriting. On to Kentucky here with Knocked Loose, one of the newest bands here on this list, and I used to really dislike these guys until I saw them opening for Slipknot last year. Great live band, great live energy. They mix hardcore and metal in a way that feels chaotic but focused at the same time. And their newest release, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To, shows how much they've grown. This is really a coming out party for them in a lot of respects. Still heavy, but with more atmosphere and emotional depth. So I'm really interested in hearing how they follow this up and how they continue to evolve as a band. Louisiana is next here. We have Acid Bath, probably my favorite sludge metal band of all time. Such a cool melting pot of styles. 2 great albums with When the Kite String Pops and Pagan Terrorism Tactics, and really wish they would have done more, but it's great that they're reunited now. Dax Riggs is an awesome vocalist. His delivery on those 2 albums is just sick, and I love their use of tempo changes, eerie melodies. You have some doom and goth infused here, even some bluesy vibes as well, so maybe 2026 is the year we get new Acid Bath music. Who knows? Maine is another state with very little to choose from, and I've heard, by the way, that you have to drive like an hour or 2 hours just to get to the supermarket in Maine. Apparently, it takes that long to find a metal band there too, but at least we have Last Chance to Reason, a cool progressive metal band, and they're finally back from a 10-year hiatus with the new single Digital Twin last year. Hopefully they release their 4th album, Level 4, sometime soon enough. Next, we go to Maryland here for Kix. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Kix, but there really isn't much to choose from in Maryland. I mean, I know Dying Fetus is the obvious answer, but I'm just not a fan of theirs at all. Kix, of course, peaked in the 80s, pursuing a more hair metal, radio-friendly sound. Not one of my favorite bands, but a fun band for sure. From Massachusetts here, we have Dream Theater. Now, Dream Theater are synonymous with New York. All their members are from New York, but the band was formed in Massachusetts, which is something that I did not know. And with Dream Theater, they're another band that needs no introduction here. Kind of like what I was talking about with Mastodon, a band where, every band contributes something equally, right? I mean, you have John Petrucci's guitar work, which is precise and emotional. I could listen to him solo all day. Jordan Rudess brings, mind-blowing keyboard parts. John Mayung's bass ties everything together with, crazy precision. Mike Portnoy and, later Mike Mangini, like the Mangini era as well, keeps the drums tight but unpredictable. And, James LaBrie's vocals give their songs that dramatic edge, even though I know some people don't love James LaBrie. I still think he's awesome, and even on newer albums like Parasomnia, they're still experimenting and proving that they have endless ideas. Michigan, the Black Dahlia Murder, they're just one of those bands that never fail to deliver. Crazy tactical riffs, insane energy, and vocals that, hit like a punch to the gut from Trevor Sternad, rest in peace. They've always had this knack for blending melodic hooks with pure, unrelenting death metal chaos, which, makes every album feel fresh, but, unmistakably them. They're very recognizable in their sound, and even after the tragic loss of Trevor, it seemed like the end of the band, but they came back with surprising strength on Servitude, honoring his legacy while proving that they're still a force to be reckoned with. If you love horror punk with a tongue-in-cheek sense of fun, Impaler from Minnesota are your go-to. They've been cranking out gnarly riffs and, over-the-top monster-themed theatrics since the 80s. Their live energy is infectious, and their whole commitment to the horror rock vibe is legendary. Very underrated band, great to listen to when you're looking California but feeling Minnesota. Mississippi, Three Doors Down, very accessible dad rock here from the 2000s, and even if you aren't a die-hard fan, tracks like theirs sneak into your head and, stick in the best way. So, not a huge fan myself, but they do have some great tunes for sure. Not a ton to choose from the state of Missouri, but Angel Corpse is pure death metal fury and a cornerstone of extreme metal, and they gave the world some seriously relentless riffs, blast beats, and powerful vocals, and their 90s studio output is killer as well. Next, Montana, Wizard, that's with two Z's and an E. Wizard keeps the classic heavy metal torch burning with, huge anthemic riffs and a love for that old school sound, and they bring the Montana metal scene to life with tracks that feel raw and heavy, and definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of doom metal. Would definitely recommend. For Nebraska here, if you're into death metal that's both crushing and technical, Garroted is a gem. Their ability to blend brutal intensity with intricate guitar work makes them stand out from the pack with riffs that hit like a sledgehammer. Gonna go further west here to Nevada next, and I'm gonna go with Slaughter. Pure 90s glam metal nostalgia. I mean, they consistently delivered solid, catchy rock songs that are accessible and easy to listen to, and their music has a fun, energetic vibe, and the combination of, good guitar riffs, steady drumming, and memorable choruses from Mark Slaughter makes their albums enjoyable from start to finish, and even if they're not the flashiest or most groundbreaking band, their consistency and dedication to their style makes them a reliable and enjoyable listen. I had a really hard time with New Hampshire. I almost cheated and went with Dio since Ronnie was born in New Hampshire, but Scissor Fight are actually from New Hampshire. Scissor Fight, if you've not heard of them, they mix rock with a rugged southern influence stoner sound, and their songs are heavy and have, a distinctive style that sets them apart. Too bad they disbanded again earlier this year. Up next, New Jersey. Let's go with Danzig. Glenn Danzig's voice alone is iconic. It's, dark, and, his blend of bluesy metal and gothic rock has influenced, generations, right? And I could have gone with the Misfits as well, right? They were from Lodi, New Jersey. You really can't go wrong with anything from Glenn Danzig's career, but I just love that classic Danzig solo lineup with Eerie Von, Chuck Biscuits, and John Christ. Classic stuff. New Mexico, Old Man Gloom. Really underrated band here from a pretty scarce New Mexico scene. They thrive on experimental heaviness, and their mix of sludge, ambient, and hardcore makes every listen an adventure. New Mexico's desert vibes somehow seep into the music, giving it a dry, wide open, desolate feeling. I had a lot of options for New York, Anthrax, Immolation, Suffocation, Mortician, but I'm going to go with Typo Negative here. Of course, Typo had that unique sound that blended metal with gothic and doom elements in a way that felt both heavy and melodic, and, of course, Peter Steele's distinctive voice and bass playing gave the band that signature style that's, so hard to mistake for anyone else, and they were consistent in creating albums that felt cohesive and atmospheric, and their music has stood the test of time, needless to say, continuing to influence other bands and, resonate with fans years after their prime, after the passing of Peter Steele. But, if you're still into more of a Typo Negative type sound, I would definitely recommend the band A Pale Horse Named Death. formed by former drummer of the band, Sal Abiscato. So they're another fantastic band that kind of keep that Typo Negative feel alive. So definitely would recommend them. But for New York, gonna go with Typo. North Carolina is gonna go to Corrosion of Conformity. COC blends, metal, punk, and southern rock like no one else. Their groove-heavy riffs have kept them relevant for decades, and they recently toured with Alice Cooper and Judas Priest, and I saw that bill, but unfortunately I arrived halfway through Corrosion's set, which was a bummer, but I love their catalog, and I love how they evolved over the years from a hardcore-based band to more of a bluesy, sludgy metal band. In North Dakota, gonna go with Ghost Bath, and this is a band I just discovered doing research for this video. Ghost Bath deliver atmospheric, haunting black metal, showing that, North Dakota can produce some, music that's icy and emotive at the same time. So, not a huge scene there, but really glad to have discovered Ghost Bath. Definitely going to be checking them out a little more. Ohio, let's go with Nine Inch Nails, just industrial perfection, and Trent Reznor seems pretty comfortable these days making film scores and soundtracks, but he consistently pushed the boundaries of industrial rock, blending, dark, intense electronic textures with raw, emotionally charged lyrics, and has that unique ability to infuse aggression and vulnerability together, creating music that feels both, powerful and deeply personal as well. Oklahoma's up next here. Let's go with Power Lord. They're a gem of thrash metal with precision, aggression, and total intensity, and Oklahoma's scene might be small, but Power Lord proves it can still pack a punch here with complex riffs and a relentless energy. The mighty Agalloch from Oregon are next here. Agalloch masterfully blended folk, black metal, and post-rock into haunting, atmospheric compositions that evoke, landscapes as much as emotions, and their ability to weave intricate melodies with a brooding heaviness creates really a cinematic listening experience. It's both introspective and epic, right? Every album feels like a journey, showcasing a rare combination of technical skill and emotional depth. Going back now to New England for Pennsylvania, gonna go with Hailstorm. They thrive on high-energy rock anthems paired with, powerhouse vocals from Lizzie Hale, and the band have a knack for memorable hooks, gritty riffs, and a really dynamic stage presence that makes their music both accessible and powerful at the same time. I saw them live, open for Alice Cooper several years ago. They're a band you absolutely need to see live. Their songs often balance, raw, emotional honesty with an infectious energy to them, and their new album, Everest, is definitely going to be on my best metal albums of 2025 list when I do that later this year. Next is Rhode Island, and I guess it has to be Kilgore, right? I mean, my introduction to Kilgore was when Rob Van Dam used to come out to the really tacky, so bad it's good cover of Walk by Pantera in ECW, and I have to find that Extreme Music CD they released one day, but Kilgore mixes heavy riffs with an alt metal energy, and their sound is aggressive but groovy. Not top-shelf groove metal, one of many Pantera clones from the 90s, but they have an infectious intensity to them anyway. South Carolina here, let's go with Nile, and it's funny that a band inspired and so deeply rooted in ancient Egypt are actually from South Carolina, but Nile are legendary for their technical mastery and epic storytelling. They blend brutal death metal with historical and mythological themes, and their precision and complex riffs, intricate compositions create a sound that's, punishing and intellectually engaging. They've never made a bad record either. Fantastic band, surprisingly from South Carolina. South Dakota next here, and another cool band worth checking out is Woman is the Earth. They craft, really atmospheric black metal that feels, meditative and melancholic, right? And their music excels at creating immersive, emotional landscapes, right? Their melodies are expansive. The textures, evoke a really profound sense of introspection, which is hard to find, from up-and-coming black metal bands these days, in my opinion. So they're a definite standout for me. Small scene in Tennessee, but I'm going to go with Place of Skulls. They deliver heavy, doom-laden riffs with an unmistakable sense of, soul and a weight, a heaviness to their sound, like an emotional heaviness to their sound, and their music balances, crushing heaviness with contemplative melodies, creating songs that are, intense and introspective, and they're another band that I found doing research for this video, but their devotion to the craft of doom metal shines, on every track that I've heard so far. Texas belongs to Pantera here, and what can I say about Pantera? The obvious choice for Texas, in my opinion, their combination of groove, power, and technical skill makes their music instantly recognizable, right, and eternally influential. Every song hits with raw force while maintaining that remarkable musicality, right, with groovy riffs and memorable solos from Dimebag and those unrelenting vocals from Phil Anselmo. Another band that I just discovered, checking out each state's individual scenes here, but from Utah, I'm going to go with Visigoth. they channel classic heavy metal with epic storytelling and soaring melodies as well, and their music is, cinematic in scale, combining technical guitar work and powerful vocals, and they're also known for being fantastic live, so I'll have to check them out if they ever come around, but each track I've heard so far feels anthemic, celebrating classic traditional metal while keeping it, fresh and compelling. If you're looking for new doom bands to listen to, check out Witch from Vermont. Witch fuses, doom and stoner metal with experimental textures and really hypnotic rhythms, and their sound is heavy but atmospheric too, drawing listeners into, a trance-like state that emphasizes the mood and sonic depth of what they're doing, and each track showcases their creativity and willingness to, really push the boundaries of conventional metal. Virginia was an easy one for me. We have Lamb of God, just a force of precision, aggression, and relentless energy in modern metal, right? I mean, their intricate riffs and pounding rhythms with dynamic vocal deliveries from Randy Blythe create music that's technically impressive and also, viscerally intense too. And love their new single, Sepsis, as well. Reviewed it over in the Shorts tab if you want to check that out. My voice is giving out on me now. I've done like 47 takes so far. They have rare ability to balance complexity with sheer headbanging power, so for me, it's gotta be Lamb of God. I'm losing my voice, but we're in the home stretch now with Washington and Alice in Chains. My third favorite band of all time. In my opinion, the term grunge is more of a marketing term than a genre. Alice in Chains are always a metal band, in my opinion, and the heaviest from that Seattle scene. Love the dark, emotional vocal harmonies from Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley, and Lane was such an awesome vocalist, and they were able to turn a lot of pain and suffering into something really beautiful, and their atmosphere and songwriting have left an indelible mark on rock and metal alike, and even in the post-Lane era, I love, the Will Duvall era as well, still killing it to this day. If this video is good for one thing, it's how many new bands it actually introduced me to. So, from West Virginia, we have Byzantine, who combine technical thrash with groove metal with exceptional songwriting and, dynamic, complex arrangements. Their music is accessible, but complex at the same time. It offers intricate riffs, tight rhythms, and catchy hooks, and each album demonstrates their versatility, creativity, and commitment to real high level of musicianship. Wisconsin has Morbid Saint, thrash metal legends, and, relentless speed, ferocity, and precision in their playing, and their aggressive riffs, sharp tempos, and raw energy really capture the spirit of classic thrash while adding their own brutal signature style to it, and their music is, pure, unrelenting intensity, and I'm so glad that they're back, right? Still killing it with their most recent album, Swallowed by Hell, one of my favorite albums from last year, one of the best metal comebacks ever, so fantastic band who are back now, making up for lost time like they never left. Last but not least, we have Agony by Default from Wyoming, and I am in agony after going through all 49 other states, but, Agony by Default blends post-metal and atmospheric doom with some really layered melodies and emotional depth, and their songs are sprawling and immersive and textured, rewarding listeners who engage deeply with their sound, and their ability to combine heaviness with intricate arrangements made them stand out to me when I was looking into their music for this video. Not a big scene in Wyoming, but Agony by Default are really cool, so I'm definitely going to keep listening to them. So that wraps up this video here, going through all 50 states, choosing my favorite metal band from each state. And people are going to say, where's Washington, D.C. on this list? Even if I did 50 states, people could be like, you left out Washington, D.C. So, okay, fine, Washington, D.C., bad brains. There you go. But we did 50 states here, 51 if you want to count Washington, D.C. Lots of great bands, lots of scenes that I was not aware of. Had to do some diving into some of these states to, find some new bands, which is really cool. Can't wait to continue to listen to them. But, overall, this was a lot harder than I thought it would be, but we made it all the way through here. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you don't miss a new upload, and let me know down in the comment section below. Do not do all 50 states, unless you want to, but it's a lot harder than it looks, trust me. So, give me your hometown state and your favorite band from that state, or, if you're not from America, give me your favorite band from your hometown country. I want to hear from you. So let me know all that good stuff in the comments, and until next time, it's the CD Guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.